The house was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. That is not something you notice when you are young. When you are young, the house is always full of something. The television, the kettle whistling, the sound of shoes on hardwood floors, children calling from other rooms. But at 74, in a house where the lights have been off since 4 in the afternoon, you notice every sound your own body makes. I was sitting in my armchair near the window, the one Harold picked out 31 years ago at a furniture store on Route 9. He had sat in every chair in that store, bouncing slightly, testing the cushions, until I laughed and told him he looked like a man auditioning chairs for a very important job. He said, "Dorothy May, a good chair is not furniture. It is a decision about how you want to spend the rest of your life." I have never stopped loving that man, even after 6 years without him. Outside, the October sky had gone the color of old pewter. The temperature inside the house was 51 degrees. I knew this because the small thermometer on the kitchen wall, the one shaped like a sunflower that my former student Gracie had given me 15 years ago, still worked perfectly. The heater did not. Sandra had said it was unnecessary. "The fall hasn't really set in yet, Dorothy," she had told me 3 weeks ago, standing in my kitchen with her arms crossed and her voice carrying that particular tone, smooth and certain, like a door that has already been locked from the outside. "We'll look at it in November if it's really needed. No point spending money on something you don't need yet." I had nodded. I had become very good at nodding. On the side table next to my chair, there was a box of crackers, the plain kind, the ones that taste like nothing in particular, and a glass of water. This was my dinner. Not because I had forgotten to cook, not because I was unable, but because the envelope Sandra had left me 18 days ago had contained $80, and I had stretched it as far as $80 could go. My name is Dorothy May Hargrove. I am 74 years old. For 38 years, I stood in front of children at Jefferson Elementary and taught them to read, to write, to think carefully, and to ask questions when something did not feel right. I had forgotten, somewhere along the way, to follow my own teaching. I worked my entire life for the pension I receive now. $12,000 every month, deposited reliably on the first of each month, the result of decades of careful service and careful saving. $12,000 is not a fortune, but it is freedom. It is the ability to buy good groceries and keep the heat on and meet your friend Betty for lunch on Thursdays and not have to ask anyone for anything. At least, that is what it used to be. 3 years ago, I fell on the back porch steps. It was nothing dramatic. A wet leaf, a moment of inattention, a sharp pain in my left wrist that turned out to be a hairline fracture. I was in a soft cast for 6 weeks. My son Robert came over every few days, bringing casseroles from Sandra and a worried expression that I found both touching and, in retrospect, something else entirely. "Mom," he said one evening, sitting across from me at this same kitchen table, "Sandra and I have been talking. You shouldn't have to deal with bills and banking when you're recovering. You know she does accounting. It's literally her job. Let us just help manage things for a while, just until you're back on your feet." I remember looking at my son's face. Robert was 44 then. He had his father's jaw and his father's habit of leaning forward slightly when he wanted you to believe something was important. I had known that face his entire life. I had held it in my hands when he was 3 days old. "It's just temporary," he said. Sandra placed a document on the table. She explained it quickly, using words like convenience and authorization, and just in case. She pointed to the line where I should sign. Robert smiled encouragingly. I signed. I did not read it carefully. I trusted my son. I trusted the face I had known for 47 years. That document was a power of attorney for financial matters. I did not know, when I signed it, that temporary would last 3 years. I did not know that I would stop receiving paper bank statements within 2 months, because Sandra had changed the mailing address. I did not know that the online banking login would be changed to an email address I did not control. I did not know that the envelope system would begin. Sandra stopping by once or twice a month, handing me cash in a white envelope, telling me this was my spending money for the period. $50, sometimes $100, once $140, which felt almost generous. I stopped having lunch with Betty on Thursdays. Sandra said it wasn't in the budget. I stopped buying the good coffee I had enjoyed every morning for 20 years. I stopped sending birthday checks to my grandchildren. I told myself it was because my pension must have been smaller than I remembered. Taxes, deductions, perhaps I had miscalculated somewhere. I am a woman who balanced classroom budgets and managed a household through 2 recessions. But I stopped trusting my own arithmetic. And slowly, without quite realizing it was happening, I started sitting in the dark. The knock at the door came at 6:47 in the evening. I heard it and felt something cold move through me. Not the cold of the 51-degree room, but a different kind. The cold of being seen when you have stopped believing you deserve to be seen. Then I heard the key in the lock. Only 3 people had a key to this house: Robert, Sandra, and my granddaughter Lily. The door opened. The light in the entryway clicked on, then the lamp in the hallway, and then Lily was standing in the doorway of the living room, still in her coat, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes moving quickly around the room the way they always did when she was taking inventory of a situation. She was 28 years old, and she had her father Thomas's eyes. My firstborn, who had died 4 years ago in a car accident on a rain-slicked highway, leaving behind a daughter who had inherited every ounce of his quiet, steady intelligence. "Grandma," her voice was careful, "why are all the lights off?" "I was resting," I said. The lie came out smoothly. I had been telling small lies like that for months. I was resting. I wasn't hungry. I prefer the quiet. Lily did not move from the doorway for a moment. She looked at me. Really looked. The way young people rarely do with old people, as if they are actually seeing rather than just checking. And then she walked to the lamp beside my chair and turned it on. The light felt almost physical. I blinked. Lily's eyes went to the side table, the crackers, the glass of water. "Grandma," she said again, softer this time. "Is this your dinner?" I opened my mouth to explain, to say I wasn't very hungry, that I'd eaten earlier, that I was watching my weight, any of the small, comfortable lies that had become a second language to me. But I looked at my granddaughter's face, Thomas's eyes, serious and full of love, and I could not. "Yes," I said quietly. She moved through the house the way I imagine a doctor moves through an examination room, methodical, calm on the outside, taking note of everything. The kitchen first. She opened the refrigerator and stood looking at it for a long moment. 1 partial stick of butter, half a bottle of water, a lemon that had begun to pucker at the edges. She opened the freezer. Empty. She checked the pantry. 4 cans of soup, 2 boxes of crackers, a container of oatmeal. She opened the cabinet where I kept my medications. She stood very still. "Grandma, your blood pressure medication." She held up the empty orange bottle. "The refill date was 2 weeks ago." "I know," I said from the doorway. "I was going to ask Sandra to..." "To what?" Lily's voice was still gentle, but there was something underneath it now, something tightening. "To give you money to buy your own medication?" I didn't answer. She came back to the living room and sat on the ottoman in front of my chair. She took both my hands in hers the way she had done since she was small. "Grandma, I need you to tell me something, and I need you to tell me honestly." She paused. "How much money do you receive every month?" $12,000, I said. Lily looked at me without blinking. "And when is the last time you saw that money? In your account? On a statement? Anything?" I thought about it. Really thought. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Sandra handles the statements. She says it's easier." Lily's hands tightened slightly around mine. She took a breath. And then, before she could say anything else, we both heard it. The sound of a key in the front door. Sandra walked in like she owned the place. That is the only way I know how to describe it. There was no hesitation at the door, no knock, no calling out. She simply entered, the way you enter a building you are responsible for, and she came down the hallway and stopped when she saw Lily sitting in front of me. For just a fraction of a second, so brief I might have imagined it, something shifted in Sandra's face. Then the smooth expression settled back into place like a mask finding its angle. "Lily," she said, with a smile that was perfectly calibrated. "What a nice surprise. I didn't know you were visiting." "I didn't know I needed to announce myself," Lily said pleasantly, "to visit my grandmother in her home." A small silence. Sandra set her purse on the entryway table, my entryway table in my house, and walked toward the kitchen. "I was just stopping by to check on Dorothy, make sure everything's in order." "And is it?" Lily asked. "In order?" Sandra turned on the kitchen light and looked around with the assessing expression I had seen dozens of times over the past 3 years. the expression that said she was cataloging, measuring, deciding. "Of course," she said. "Dorothy is fine. Aren't you, Dorothy?" I looked at Sandra. I looked at Lily. For 3 years, that question, "Aren't you, Dorothy?" had always been followed by my agreement. "Yes, fine. Everything is fine." "I'm not sure," I said. Sandra's eyes came to me with an attention that felt nothing like warmth. "Grandma told me she receives $12,000 a month," Lily said, still in that pleasant, even tone. "And I'm looking at an empty refrigerator and an empty pill bottle and a box of crackers. So I'd like to understand the gap." "I handle Dorothy's finances," Sandra said. "She signed over authorization 3 years ago. She was recovering from an injury and needed support. We structured things for her benefit. Bills paid automatically, investments managed properly, a cash allowance for day-to-day needs." "An allowance," Lily repeated. "It's a practical system. She's 74 years old. She's not a child on an allowance." Lily stood up slowly. "I'd like to see her account statements, all of them, for the past 3 years. Sandra's smile did not waver, but it changed. Became something thinner, something with less warmth at the edges. "Those are private financial documents. I'm not going to—" "They're my grandmother's financial documents," Lily said. "She is standing right here. She can ask for them herself." Both of them looked at me. I felt my heart beating very loudly. I felt the familiar pull, the one that said, "Keep the peace, don't cause trouble, let it go." The voice that had been getting louder for 3 years while I had been getting smaller. "I would like to see my statements," I said. The words were quiet, but they were mine. Sandra looked at me for a long moment. Then she said very calmly, "I'll have to pull them together. It will take time. This isn't the right moment." "Then we'll go to the bank," Lily said. "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. "That's not necessary." "I think it is." The two women looked at each other. I watched Sandra's jaw tighten. Just slightly, just enough. "I'll call Robert," Sandra said. "Feel free," Lily replied. Sandra left 10 minutes later without another word about the statements, without any acknowledgement of the empty refrigerator or the missing medication. She simply gathered her purse and walked out, and I heard her car start in the driveway. Lily went immediately to her phone. Within 40 minutes, grocery bags were being carried in from a delivery driver at the front door. She cooked while I sat at the kitchen table and watched. She moved through my kitchen like she remembered every drawer, every cabinet, because she did. She had spent summers here when she was young, following me around, asking me to teach her things. The smell of soup filled the house. Chicken broth, carrots, noodles, simple and warm, and so familiar that my eyes filled before I could stop them. "Why didn't you call me?" Lily asked softly, her back to me, stirring. I watched the steam rising. "Because I thought I was helping Robert," I said. Dee said. "He said the business needed time. He said things were tight. I thought, if my contribution could help him get through a difficult period." "He told you that he was using your money?" "Not exactly." I paused. "He said Sandra was investing it, growing it. He said one day it would be worth much more." Lily turned off the burner and faced me. "Grandma, did you ever see any of these investments? Any statements, any returns, anything?" I thought about it. Truly thought. "No," I said. "Sandra always said they were long-term, that it was complicated to explain." Lily set 2 bowls on the table and sat across from me. She reached out and put her hand over mine. "Tomorrow," she said gently, "we are going to find out exactly what has been happening. Whatever we discover, I want you to know that I am not going anywhere. Whatever it is, we handle it together." I picked up my spoon. My hand was shaking slightly. It did that sometimes now. I steadied it against the bowl. The soup was hot. It was the best thing I had tasted in longer than I could remember. "I taught for 38 years, I said after a moment. "I used to tell my students, the bravest thing you can do is ask a question you're afraid to hear the answer to." Lily smiled. Thomas's smile, quiet and real. "You taught me that," she said. We ate together in the lit kitchen, in the warm house, and for the first time in a very long while, the darkness felt like something that belonged to the past rather than the present. Then my phone buzzed on the counter. Lily saw my face change before I saw the message. She reached over and picked up the phone before I could. She read it, then she read it again. She placed the phone face up on the table between us. The message was from a number I did not recognize. It said 5 words. "Don't go to the bank tomorrow." Lily looked at me. The kitchen was very quiet. "Grandma," she said, and her voice was steady in a way that told me she had made a decision. This just became something bigger than groceries. She picked up the phone and took a screenshot. Outside, the October wind pushed against the windows. Inside, the soup was still warm. I looked at my granddaughter's face, Thomas's eyes, certain and clear, and I felt something I had not felt in 3 years. Not peace, not yet, but the beginning of it. The small, fragile, necessary feeling of a woman who has decided she is done sitting in the dark. I did not sleep that night. Not in the way people mean when they say it casually. Oh, I barely slept. I kept waking up. I lay in my bed in the dark, with my eyes open and my mind moving through every conversation, every signed document, every white envelope, every small moment over the past 3 years when I had accepted an explanation I should have questioned, and I could not make any of it stop. The thermometer on this kitchen wall still read 51 degrees. Lily had found an extra blanket in the hall closet and brought it to me without being asked. I could hear her in the living room, the quiet sound of her moving, the low glow of her laptop screen visible under my bedroom door. She was working. At midnight, for me. I thought about Thomas. I thought about how, when Lily was born, he had called me from the hospital at 2 in the morning, his voice so full of something he couldn't name that he simply said, "Mom, she's here. She's perfect." I thought about how I had driven to that hospital in my robe and slippers and held that baby girl and known, with the certainty you only feel a few times in a life, that she would be extraordinary. I had not imagined that extraordinary would look like this. A 28-year-old woman sitting in my living room at midnight, pulling apart 3 years of financial records by lamplight because her grandmother had forgotten how to ask questions. Around 2 in the morning, she knocked softly on my door. "Grandma, are you awake?" "Yes." She came in and sat on the edge of the bed. In the low light, she looked young and serious at the same time, the way Thomas had always looked when he was working through something important. "I didn't want to wait until morning to tell you," she said. "I called a friend of mine tonight. He works in corporate compliance. He helps companies audit their financial records. I asked him to pull whatever he could find on Robert's business." I sat up slowly. "And?" Lily folded her hands in her lap. Hargrove Property Solutions, LLC was registered 3 years ago, same month you signed the power of attorney. The timing of that landed quietly, like a stone dropped into still water. "The company has filed tax returns showing almost no revenue for 2 consecutive years," she continued. "There are 4 active lawsuits from unpaid contractors, and there are liens, multiple liens, filed against the business." "How much?" I asked. My voice was steadier than I expected. "The liens my friend could access total over $400,000. The number sat between us in the dim room. "Robert told me 200, I said slowly. "Yesterday on the phone. He said the company had debt, but he said 200,000. Lily looked at me carefully. "He told you about part of it." I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. Outside, the wind had picked up. I could hear it moving through the oak tree Harold had planted in the backyard 22 years ago. The one he said would outlast both of us, and he had been right about that, as he was right about most things. "Who is Gerald Whitfield?" I asked. Lily's expression shifted. Not surprise exactly, but a kind of careful attention. "Why do you know that name?" "I don't know it," I said. "I found a business card 3 months ago, wedged between the cushions of the living room sofa. I thought it belonged to Robert, and I set it on the entryway table, and Sandra picked it up when she came by. I forgot about it until tonight." Lily reached into the pocket of her sweatshirt and placed her phone on the bed between us, screen facing up. There was a photograph of a news article on it. Local paper, dated 2021. The headline read, "Columbus family files civil suit against financial advisor following elderly mother's home loss." The name in the article was Gerald Whitfield. "He's been investigated before," Lily said quietly. "The case in Columbus involved a similar pattern. An adult child with a struggling business, a parent with a reliable income, a power of attorney document, and Gerald Whitfield advising the family on, as he called it, asset restructuring." "See, what happened to the family?" "The mother lost her home. The son avoided criminal charges by cooperating. Whitfield settled out of court and kept his license. I looked at the ceiling of my bedroom, the same ceiling I had looked at for 31 years, the water stain near the window that Harold had always meant to fix and never gotten around to, the small crack above the closet door that appeared after a particularly cold winter 6 years ago. "He was here," I said. "Gerald Whitfield was in this house." Lily went very still. "When?" 8 months ago. Robert brought him by. He introduced him as a consultant. He said Whitfield was advising on renovation estimates, the possibility of updating the kitchen, maybe adding insulation. I paused. He walked through most of the downstairs. He was very pleasant. He shook my hand when he left. Lily was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was controlled and precise. "Grandma, tomorrow at the bank, I need you to be prepared for the possibility that what we find is worse than either of us is expecting." I looked at my granddaughter's face. "I spent 38 years, I said, preparing children for things that were harder than they expected. I think I can manage." She almost smiled. "I know you can." She leaned over and kissed my forehead, the way I had kissed hers 1,000 times when she was small. And then she went back to the living room, and I lay in the dark, and eventually, somewhere near 4 in the morning, I slept. The First National Bank branch on Callaway Avenue opened at 9 o'clock. Lily and I were in the parking lot at 8:45. The morning was cold and bright, the kind of October morning that looks warmer than it is, the sky a hard clear blue. I wore my good coat, the gray wool one Harold had given me for our 35th anniversary, because I had decided the night before that I was going to walk into that bank looking like exactly what I was, a woman who knew her own worth. Lily held the door for me. The lobby was warm and smelled of coffee and carpet, and the particular quiet efficiency of a place where serious things happen in ordinary ways. At the front desk, Lily spoke clearly. "My grandmother is the primary account holder on a pension account with this branch. She'd like to review her complete account history and speak with the branch manager." The young man at the desk nodded and asked for identification. I handed over my driver's license. My hands were steady. We waited 12 minutes. Then a woman at the desk led us to a glass-walled office near the back of the branch. A man in a navy suit rose to meet us, mid-50s, silver-haired, with the careful manner of someone who had delivered difficult news before and had learned to do it with both honesty and kindness. "Mrs. Hargrove," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Paul Dennison, branch manager. Please, sit down. How can I help you today?" "I'd like to see my account," I said. "All of it. Every transaction for the past 3 years." Paul Dennison nodded and turned to his computer. He typed. He clicked. He paused. He typed again. The pause that followed was not long, perhaps 15 seconds. But in those 15 seconds, I watched his face with the attention of a woman who had spent her career reading the faces of children who were trying not to show what they knew. And I saw what he was seeing before he said a word. "Mrs. Hargrove," he began carefully. "I want to make sure I'm reading this correctly before I—" "Please," I said. "Just tell me." He turned the monitor slightly so we could see it from across the desk. The screen showed a transaction history, column after column of transfers, regular, substantial, all flowing in the same direction, out, into an account labeled Hargrove Property Solutions, LLC. "Over the past 36 months, Paul Dennison said slowly, there have been systematic transfers from your pension account to an external business account. The total transferred is," he paused, $289,000. Lily made a sound that was not quite a word. I did not make any sound at all. "And the current balance?" Lily asked, her voice tight and precise. Paul Dennison looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. $94. The room was very quiet. I had been a teacher for 38 years. I understood numbers. I understood what 36 months of $12,000 deposits looked like. $432,000 deposited, and $94 remaining. I understood what this difference between those two figures meant. "Under what authorization were these transfers made?" Lily asked. "There is a power of attorney document on file," Paul Dennison said, "granting financial management authority to Sandra Hargrove," Lily said. "Yes. And the transfers? Were there any flags? Any review?" Paul Dennison shifted slightly in his chair. There were internal notes generated when the transfer volume reached certain thresholds. However, the documentation provided indicated these were family-authorized structured investments. Without a complaint or a legal flag, the branch processed them according to the authorization on file. "We are filing a formal review," Lily said. "Today, right now." "Of course," Paul Dennison said quietly. He reached for a form, and then I noticed something else on the screen. A notation I had not seen before. A small reference number attached to a document filed 6 weeks ago. "What is that?" I asked, pointing. Paul Dennison looked at where I was pointing. He clicked on the notation. He read, and I watched his face change again, the careful professional neutrality becoming something that was not quite neutrality anymore. "Mrs. Hargrove," he said slowly, "there is a lien notification on file, filed 6 weeks ago by a private lending entity called Whitfield Capital Partners." He paused. "The lien is against the property at 4417 Elm Creek Drive." Lily's head turned toward me very slowly. "That's my address," I said. My voice sounded far away. "That's my home." "Yes, ma'am," Paul Dennison said. "It appears your property was listed as collateral for a business loan of $180,000, taken out by Hargrove Property Solutions, LLC. I sat with that sentence for a moment. Let it settle into its full weight. Whitfield Capital Partners. Gerald Whitfield. The man who had walked through my kitchen 8 months ago, shaking my hand, asking about my cabinets. He had not been looking at renovation potential. He had been looking at collateral. He had not only advised Robert on how to use my pension, he had loaned the failing business additional money and taken my home as security for that loan. He was making money on both ends, taking a fee for his advice while also charging interest on a loan secured by my property. He built himself into the middle of it, Lily said quietly, more to herself than to us. He's not just a consultant. He's a creditor. He profits whether the business succeeds or fails, because if it fails, he takes the house. Paul Dennison was looking at us both with an expression that had moved past professional concern into something more personal. "Mrs. Hargrove," he said gently, "I want to be direct with you. What I'm seeing in these records raises serious concerns about fiduciary misuse under your power of attorney. If funds were transferred for purposes that did not primarily benefit you, and particularly if your home was pledged as collateral without your informed consent, there are legal remedies available." "We have an attorney," Lily said. "He'll be here within the hour." She had called Frank Holloway at 8 in the morning before we even left the house. I had not known that. She had not told me because she had not wanted me to feel like the situation was already out of control. She had wanted me to walk into that bank as a woman asking questions, not a woman being managed. That was Thomas's daughter. That was the girl I had held in a hospital at 2 in the morning, 31 years ago. "We want to file the formal review," I said to Paul Dennison, "and I want it documented that I did not have full informed understanding of how my funds were being used." Paul Dennison nodded and placed the forms in front of me. I picked up the pen. My hand was steadier than it had been in years. Robert and Sandra arrived at the bank at 10:15. I do not know who called them. Paul Dennison assured us later that it was not anyone from his branch. But they arrived, Robert in a jacket he'd pulled on over what appeared to be yesterday's shirt, Sandra composed and unreadable in her dark coat, and they were brought to the conference room where Lily and I were waiting with Frank Holloway. Frank was 63, a compact and plain-spoken man who had practiced financial and elder law in Ohio for 30 years. He had the quality I had always most respected in people. He said exactly what he meant, without flourish, without evasion. Robert looked at me, and the expression on his face was not the face of a man caught in a crime. It was the face of a man who was drowning, and had known for a long time that he was drowning, and had told himself every single day that tomorrow he would reach the surface. "Mom," he said. Just that. Just my name. "Sit down, Robert," I said. He sat. Sandra sat beside him, very straight, her hands folded on the table. Frank Holloway opened his folder. "The account review has confirmed transfers totaling $289,000 from Mrs. Hargrove's pension account to Hargrove Property Solutions, LLC, over 36 months. Additionally, a private lien has been filed against Mrs. Hargrove's residential property by Whitfield Capital Partners, used as collateral for a $180,000 business loan." Sandra said, "Dorothy signed a power of attorney. which authorizes financial management in the account holder's best interest, Frank said without looking up from his folder. Not in the interest of a third-party business venture. There is a meaningful legal distinction. We were investing for her future, Sandra said. She is 74 years old, Lily said quietly. Her future is now. Silence. I looked at Robert. He was staring at the table. Robert, I said, did you know that Gerald Whitfield is the one holding the lien on my house? That his own company is the creditor? Robert looked up, and what I saw in his face in that moment was something I had not expected. Genuine shock. He turned to Sandra. You told me it was a bank loan, he said slowly. You said the collateral was standard procedure. You never said it was Whitfield. Sandra did not answer. Robert's face changed. The drowning man, I realized, had not known exactly what he had drowned in. He advised you to use her pension, Lily said to Robert, carefully watching his face. And then he loaned you additional money at interest, secured by her home. He profits from the advice fee, and he profits if the loan defaults. He's positioned himself to win regardless of what happens to your business. Robert stared at the table for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, I trusted him. And in that sentence, those 3 words, I heard something I recognized, because they were the same 3 words I had said to myself every day for 3 years about Robert. I trusted him. We had both been standing in the dark. Robert had simply been standing in a different room of it. Frank Holloway laid out the next steps with the quiet efficiency of a man who had navigated situations like this before. The formal review would trigger a freeze on transfers from my account. Legal notification would be sent to Whitfield Capital Partners regarding the disputed lien. The power of attorney document would be flagged pending investigation of fiduciary compliance. Sandra reached across the table and touched Robert's arm. He looked at her hand. Then he moved his arm away. It was a small gesture, but in that conference room, with the morning light coming in through the high windows, it was the moment I understood that this family was fracturing. Not because of me, not because of Lily, not because of the truth being spoken aloud. It was fracturing because the truth had always been there, and the weight of holding it together for this long had finally become more than the structure could bear. Robert, Frank said, if you're willing to provide documentation, emails, contracts, financial records relating to Whitfield's advisory role, it may significantly affect how liability is apportioned in the review. Robert was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I have everything. Every email, every contract, every record. Sandra's composure cracked, just slightly, just at the edges. Robert, she is my mother, he said, and his voice broke on the last word. He did not look at Sandra. He looked at me. She is my mother, and I put her in a house with no heat and no food and no medication, and I told myself it was temporary. I told myself every single month that I was going to fix it before she noticed. Before I noticed, I said softly. He looked at me. His eyes were full. As if I was not supposed to notice, I said. As if the correct outcome was that your mother never knew. He didn't answer, because there was no answer to that. There was only the truth of it, sitting in the room with all of us. I folded my hands on the table. I'm not here to destroy you, Robert, I said. I'm here because I have the right to know what is happening in my own life. And because somewhere along the way, I forgot that I had that right. Robert wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Outside the conference room windows, the October sun was high and bright. People were walking through the bank lobby, conducting ordinary business, carrying on with ordinary days. My phone buzzed on the table. Another message. Unknown number. This time it said, "You should have stayed home." Lily picked up my phone, read it, and placed it in front of Frank Holloway without a word. Frank looked at it. "We're adding this to the documentation," he said. "Mrs. Hargrove, are you aware of anyone who might be attempting to intimidate you into withdrawing this review?" I thought of Gerald Whitfield's calm smile, the way he had walked through my kitchen and looked at my walls. "Yes," I said. "I think I am." Frank nodded. He made a note, and then he looked at me. Really looked, the way Paul Dennison had, the way Lily always did. And he said simply, "You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Hargrove." I picked up the pen again. I signed the review forms. All of them. My name was shaky on the paper, but it was my name. And this time, I knew exactly what I was signing. We were in Lily's car, pulling out of the bank parking lot, when I looked back through the window at the building behind us. 36 months, $289,000, $94 remaining, a lien on my home. I had walked into that building as a woman who was still not entirely sure she deserved to ask questions. I was leaving it as something else. "Grandma," Lily said, eyes on the road. "How are you feeling?" I thought about it honestly. "Frightened," I said, and awake, both at the same time. She reached over and put her hand briefly over mine. "That's exactly the right way to feel," she said. We drove home through the bright October morning, and when Lily turned onto Elm Creek Drive and I saw my house, the oak tree in the backyard, the porch where I had sat on summer evenings for 31 years, I felt something rise in my chest that was not grief and not anger. It was something closer to what Harold used to call plain determination, the quiet, unglamorous, completely reliable decision to simply keep going. My house, my money, my life, not yet safe, not yet resolved, but mine. And then Lily said very quietly, "Grandma, the front door is open." I looked. She was right. The front door was open 3 inches. Not swinging, not broken, just open, the way a door is left when someone has passed through it recently and did not bother to pull it shut behind them. The way a door is left by someone who does not expect to be questioned about being there. Lily put the car in park. She said, "Stay here," in the voice Thomas used to use when he meant it absolutely. I did not stay. I followed her up the porch steps, slowly, my hand on the railing Harold had installed the summer before he got sick. Lily pushed the door open fully with her forearm, not touching the handle, and we stood together in the entryway and looked. The living room appeared undisturbed at first. The armchair, the lamp, the side table where just last night there had been a box of crackers and a glass of water. Then I saw the filing cabinet. It stood against the wall beside my small writing desk, a 2-drawer metal cabinet, olive green, that Harold and I had bought at an office supply store the year we refinanced the house. I kept everything in it. 30 years of tax returns, property documents, Harold's death certificate, my pension paperwork, the children's birth certificates. Both drawers were open. Papers were spread across the floor in a fan-shaped pattern, as if someone had pulled out a handful and let them fall without caring where they landed. "Don't touch anything," Lily said. She moved through the room carefully, looking without disturbing. I followed her to the kitchen. Every cabinet was closed, the counters undisturbed. But the drawer beside the stove, the one where I kept a spare set of keys, old instruction manuals, miscellaneous papers, was pulled out and empty. On the kitchen table sat a white envelope. My name was written on it in block letters. Just Dorothy. No last name, no return address. As if whoever left it knew that I would know it was meant for me. Lily took a photograph of it with her phone before she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, 3 sentences, printed in large block letters. "Withdraw the review. Sign the voluntary sale agreement. You will receive 30%. This is the final offer." Lily read it twice. Then she placed it on the table with the deliberate calm of a person who is very angry and is choosing not to be governed by that anger. "We're calling the police," she said. "Yes," I agreed. Officer Dana Pruitt arrived within 20 minutes. She was younger than I expected, mid-30s with short auburn hair and the kind of steady, unhurried manner that I associated with people who had learned early that rushing rarely improved anything. She moved through my house the way Lily had moved through it the night before, carefully, observantly, missing nothing. She checked every point of entry, every window latch, the back door, the basement door. Nothing was broken. Nothing was forced. "No sign of forced entry," she said, standing in the living room with her notepad. "The lock on your front door, is it original to the house?" "We replaced it about 12 years ago," I said. "And who has a key?" I thought about it. "My son Robert, his wife Sandra, my granddaughter Lily." I paused. "And one other person." Officer Pruitt looked at me. "8 months ago," I said. "A man named Gerald Whitfield came to this house. My son brought him. He said Whitfield was a renovation consultant. Whitfield walked through the downstairs for about 20 minutes. I paused. He was alone in the entryway for several minutes while Robert and I were in the kitchen. My spare key was in the drawer beside the stove. Officer Pruitt wrote carefully. And you believe he may have copied it at that time? I believe it is possible, I said. Do you have documentation connecting this individual to your financial situation? Our attorney does, Lily said. She gave Officer Pruitt Frank Holloway's name and number and provided screenshots of both threatening text messages. Officer Pruitt looked at the messages for a long moment. Mrs. Hargrove, she said, I want to make sure I understand the full picture. You initiated a formal financial review this morning. Within hours, someone entered your home and left a message telling you to withdraw that review and sell your property. You've received 2 threatening text messages from an unknown number, and you have reason to believe the individual connected to the financial scheme may have had access to your home for several months. Yes, I said, that is the full picture. Officer Pruitt nodded slowly. This is beyond a civil financial matter. I'm going to recommend this be escalated to our financial crimes unit. She looked at me directly. I want you to know what you're describing, the systematic control of an elderly person's finances through deception, the intimidation, the unauthorized entry. These are serious offenses. The fact that it involves family does not make them less serious. I know, I said. She finished taking her report. Before she left, she paused in the doorway and turned back to me. You did the right thing going to the bank today, she said. A lot of people in your situation don't. I had help, I said. I looked at Lily. Officer Pruitt left. Lily changed the locks herself. She had stopped at a hardware store on the way back from the bank, I realized, because she had already anticipated this possibility. She had been 3 steps ahead all along. I sat at the kitchen table and watched her work and thought about Thomas, about how he had raised this girl, quietly and steadily, to be exactly this kind of person, to be the one who bought the locks before she needed them, to be the one who showed up. Lily, I said. She looked up from his door. Your father would be so proud of you. She held my gaze for a moment. Then she went back to the lock, and I saw her jaw tighten slightly, not with grief, but with purpose. I know, she said. He'd also say we're not done yet. Frank Holloway called at 7 that evening. Lily put the phone on speaker. We were sitting at the kitchen table again. It had become our command post, our place for difficult conversations, with cups of tea and the remains of a simple dinner Lily had made from the groceries she had ordered the night before. I've had a productive afternoon, Frank said. He sounded like a man who found productivity in places others found only chaos. The Financial Crimes Unit at the Columbus office has been briefed. They're familiar with Gerald Whitfield. He's been on their radar since the 2021 case, but they've been unable to establish a pattern broad enough for federal involvement. Lily leaned toward the phone. And now? Now they have 3 additional accounts to look at. All pension-age account holders. All with adult children who were involved in business ventures. All showing similar transfer patterns over the past 4 years. Frank paused. Dorothy, you are not the only one, but you may be the one who breaks it open. I sat with that for a moment. I thought about the other women, and I was certain most of them were women, because that is how these things tend to work, targeting the people the world has taught to be agreeable, to be helpful, to sign where they are told to sign without making a fuss. I thought about them sitting in their own dark rooms, in their own cold houses, eating whatever was left in their own mostly empty pantries, telling themselves that surely it was temporary, surely it would be explained, surely the people they loved would not have chosen this deliberately. What happens next? I asked. Tomorrow morning, Frank said, Gerald Whitfield will receive formal legal notification that the lien on your property is being disputed and that his financial advisory practices are under review. He will also receive notification that law enforcement has been briefed on the unauthorized entry and the threatening communications. He'll know it came from me, I said. Yes, Frank said simply. He will. A brief silence. Good, I said. They said. Gerald Whitfield arrived at Frank Holloway's office 2 days later. He brought his own attorney, a tall, thin man in an expensive suit who introduced himself with the studied confidence of someone who was accustomed to being the most important person in a room. Gerald himself looked exactly as he had the day he stood in my kitchen. Gray suit, careful smile. The smooth, practiced ease of a man who had spent decades making people feel that they were in capable hands. He looked at me when he entered, and I watched his face recalibrate. The small, involuntary adjustment of a person who had expected an obstacle and found instead a wall. Lily sat to my right. Frank sat across the table. Robert sat at the far end. He had called Frank the previous evening and asked to be present without Sandra, and Frank had agreed. Sandra was not there. She had retained her own attorney 2 days earlier. Gerald's attorney opened with the predictable language. Legitimate advisory services, documented authorization, industry standard asset restructuring, misunderstanding of complex financial instruments. Frank let him finish. Then he opened his folder. Whitfield Capital Partners, Frank said, received a total of $63,000 in advisory fees from Hargrove Property Solutions LLC over 28 months. Whitfield Capital Partners simultaneously holds a $180,000 note secured by Mrs. Hargrove's residential property, on which interest payments of 11% annually have been accruing. Frank looked up. Mr. Whitfield was simultaneously a paid advisor to the business and its primary creditor. He had a direct financial interest in the business's continued operation and a secured claim against the family home if it failed. Mrs. Hargrove was never informed of this conflict of interest. Gerald's attorney began to speak. "I'm not finished," Frank said pleasantly. "The Ohio Division of Financial Institutions has received a formal complaint referencing similar advisory structures involving 3 additional clients, all retired, all with pension-dependent incomes, all showing systematic fund transfers to businesses in which Mr. Whitfield held advisory roles and subsequently became a creditor. The division has opened a preliminary inquiry." The room was quiet. Gerald's attorney leaned over and spoke quietly in his client's ear. Gerald Whitfield looked at the table, and then he did what I had half expected him to do and half dreaded. He looked up at me directly, and he used the voice, the warm, reasonable, sympathetic voice that I imagined had worked on many people before me. "Dorothy," he said, "I understand this feels overwhelming. I want you to know that nothing I did was intended to harm you. Robert came to me in a desperate situation. I tried to help a family. Things became more complicated than any of us anticipated, but my intention was always Mr. Whitfield." My voice was not loud. It did not need to be. The room went still. I straightened in my chair. I put both hands flat on the table. These hands that had written on 1,000 blackboards, held 1,000 small shoulders, steadied 1,000 uncertain children through their first attempts at something difficult. "I taught school for 38 years, I said. I taught children as young as 5 to understand the difference between a mistake and a choice. A mistake is when you do not know better. A choice is when you do." Gerald Whitfield said nothing. "You knew," I said. "You knew the conflict of interest when you accepted the advisory fee and simultaneously structured yourself as the creditor. You knew when you walked through my house and looked at my walls and assessed my property's value. You knew when you advised my son to use my pension without ensuring I understood the risk to my home. You knew when your associate sent threatening messages to a 74-year-old woman after she went to her bank and asked a simple question." His attorney put a hand on Gerald's arm. "I am not asking you for an apology," I continued. "I am telling you who I am, so that you understand clearly what you chose to do." I looked at him steadily. "You chose to walk into my home and shake my hand and look me in the eye and build a structure around my life that depended on me never asking questions. You counted on me being agreeable. You counted on me being old and trusting and too polite to make trouble." I paused. "You miscounted," I said. The silence that followed was long enough that Lily reached over and put her hand over mine. Gerald Whitfield's attorney said something quiet into his client's ear. Gerald looked at the table, and then Robert from the far end of the table said, "I have everything. Every email, every meeting note, every contract." His voice was flat and tired and entirely certain. "Everything showing that you advised me to use my mother's funds, that you structured the collateral agreement, that you directed the transfer schedule, all of it." Gerald's attorney looked at his client. Gerald looked at Robert. "You told me," Robert said slowly, "that if things ever became difficult, the documentation could be structured so the liability fell on the family. You said that was the protection I was paying for." He paused. "I have the email where you said that, word for word." The air in the room changed. Frank Holloway closed his folder with a small, deliberate click. "I think," Frank said pleasantly, "that we're done here." The weeks that followed were not simple. I want to be honest about that, because the stories we tell about these things sometimes make the resolution sound clean. A villain exposed, a wrong righted, and then life resuming its previous shape. That is not how it was. The Ohio Division of Financial Institutions opened a formal investigation into Gerald Whitfield and Whitfield Capital Partners. The investigation encompassed 4 clients, 2 states, and a financial advisory career stretching back nearly 15 years. It would take months. The lien on my house was challenged in court on the grounds of undisclosed conflict of interest and lack of informed consent. Frank filed for an emergency injunction to prevent any foreclosure action while the investigation proceeded. The court granted it. My power of attorney was formally revoked. My account access was restored with independent oversight. A neutral financial manager appointed by the court, who sent me complete statements every month and required my direct approval for any transfer above $500. The first statement I received, I read every line, every single one. It took me an hour and a half, and I did not mind at all. Sandra retained her attorney and said very little publicly. The investigation into her role in the transfers was ongoing. Her marriage to Robert did not survive the autumn. Robert came to my house alone on a Tuesday afternoon in November. The oak tree in the backyard had lost most of its leaves. I made coffee and we sat at the kitchen table. The same table where he had sat 47 years ago doing homework. The same table where he had held my hands and told me he needed my help. The same table where I had signed a document I did not read. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Not weak. I want to be precise about the difference. Not broken, just humbled. The way a person looks when they have stopped pretending to be something they were not. "Mom," he said, "I don't know where to start." "Then start at the beginning," I said. Not to explain, just to tell the truth. He told the truth. It took 2 hours. He told me about the business and how quickly it had started failing, and how the failure had terrified him in a way that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with what he believed failure said about him. He told me about Gerald Whitfield, who had presented himself as a solution at precisely the moment Robert was most desperate for one. He told me how each month he had told himself that the next month would be the one where it turned around, the one where he could repay everything, and I would never need to know. "I thought I was protecting you," he said, "from knowing I had failed." "You were protecting yourself," I sadly said. Not unkindly, just accurately. He nodded. "Yes." "Robert," I said, "I have watched you your entire life. I watched you fail spelling tests and fall off bicycles and lose baseball games and not get into the first college you applied to. I watched you fail at a dozen things and try again." I paused. Failure was never the thing I was afraid of seeing in you. "What were you afraid of?" he asked. "That," I said quietly. "A man who was so afraid of being seen failing that he disappeared himself and took me with him." He was quiet for a long time. "Can you forgive me?" he asked. I looked at my son, the jaw that was Harold's jaw, the hands that I had held crossing streets 30 years ago. "Forgiveness isn't something I can hand you at a kitchen table," I said. "It's something you build, the same way trust is built, one honest day at a time." He nodded. He did not argue. He did not ask for more than that. That was how I knew he was finally telling the truth. The investigation concluded the following spring. Gerald Whitfield surrendered his financial advisory license and reached a settlement with the 4 affected families that included partial restitution. Criminal charges were referred by the Division of Financial Institutions. He entered a plea agreement that included 3 years of supervised probation, mandatory financial restitution, and a permanent bar from the financial advisory industry in Ohio. Of the $289,000 transferred from my account, $162,000 was recovered through the legal process, from the settlement, from frozen business accounts, from the restitution order. It was not everything. It was not the full 3 years, but it was real, and it was mine. And it came with a court document confirming that what had been done was wrong. The lien on my house was dissolved. I stood in Frank Holloway's office the day the final documents were signed, and I held the paper in my hands, the one that said my home was mine, clear and unencumbered. And I thought about Harold planting that oak tree in the backyard and saying it would outlast both of us. He had been right about that, too. On a Saturday morning in late April, I sat at my kitchen table with the window open for the first time since the previous spring. The yard was beginning to green. The oak tree was budding. The thermometer on the wall, the sunflower one that Gracie had given me, that had kept working faithfully through everything, read 64 degrees. The refrigerator behind me was full. Not extravagantly, not wastefully, but fully and completely and in the way that a refrigerator should be, with food for a week, with the good coffee I had missed for 3 years, with the small particular things that made a house feel like it belonged to the person living in it. My bank statement was on the table in front of me. I had read it already, that morning, first thing, the way I had read every statement for the past 6 months. $12,000 deposited on the first. Clear, complete, accounted for. Mine. My phone rang. Video call. Lily's face appeared on the screen, bright and a little windswept. She was outside somewhere, her dark hair moving. "Good morning, Grandma. How are you?" "I'm sitting in my kitchen with the window open," I said. "In my house, drinking good coffee. I'd say that's about as well as a person can be." She laughed. Thomas's laugh. We talked for 20 minutes about ordinary things. Her work, the weather, a book she was reading, whether I had called Betty Osgood about resuming their Thursday lunches. I had. Betty had cried a little, and then laughed and said she had saved my seat. After we hung up, I sat for a while in the quiet. I thought about the night Lily had walked into my dark house and turned the lights on. I thought about the bowl of soup. I thought about sitting in that bank office and watching Paul Dennison's face change as the screen showed him what 3 years of silence had cost. I thought about standing across the table from Gerald Whitfield and saying the words I said without raising my voice. I thought about the woman who had sat in this same chair 6 months ago, in the dark, eating crackers, telling herself that surely it was temporary, that surely she did not deserve to ask questions. That woman had frightened me, not because of what had been done to her, but because of how willingly she had made herself small, how thoroughly she had learned, over 3 quiet years, to take up less space, ask for less, expect less, until she was barely visible even to herself. Here is what I know now, that I did not know then, or had forgotten somewhere between the hospital and the armchair and the white envelopes. You do not lose yourself all at once. You lose yourself the way a candle loses its light, not in a single moment, but in a slow, barely perceptible diminishment, each small surrender so reasonable seeming that you do not notice the accumulation, until one day you are sitting in the dark and you cannot quite remember when you last felt warm. And here is what else I know. It takes one person who walks in and turns the light on, not because they are braver than you, but because they love you enough to refuse to pretend the dark is comfortable. One person who asks the question you have stopped asking yourself. One person who says, "I see you." When you have been invisible so long, you have half convinced yourself that invisibility was your own choice. Lily was that person for me, but I was that person too. The moment I said I would like to see my statements, the moment I picked up the pen and signed the review forms, the moment I sat across from Gerald Whitfield and told him who I was, so he would understand clearly what he had chosen to do. Those were my moments. No one could give them to me. No one could take them away. That Thursday, I drove myself to the diner on Callaway Avenue where Betty Osgood had been saving my seat for 6 months. I walked in and she stood up from the corner booth before I had even reached the table and hugged me for a long time without saying anything. And I hugged her back. And the waitress who had known us both for 15 years brought coffee without being asked and said, "Good to have you back, Dorothy." And that was all that needed to be said. We ate, we talked, we laughed about small things and a few large ones. We stayed for 2 hours, the way we always had. When I got home, I parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a moment before going inside, looking at the house, the porch, the oak tree just visible around the back corner, the front door with its new lock, my house, my life, my $12,000 a month in my account, visible on a statement I could read anytime I chose. Not because someone gave it back to me, because I asked for it. Because I walked into a bank on a cold October morning with my good coat on and my granddaughter beside me and said, "I would like to see my account." All of it. Every transaction. 5 words that changed everything. Or rather, 5 words that changed nothing about who I had always been and changed everything about who I had been allowing myself to become. I went inside. I turned on every light. The house was warm. If you are watching this, and somewhere in this story you recognized someone, a mother, a grandmother, a neighbor, a friend, who has grown quieter than she used to be, who has stopped coming to lunches, who speaks about her own finances with an uncertainty that does not match the woman you know her to be, ask her one question. Just one. When is the last time you looked at your own account? You may be the person who turns the light on, and if you are the one sitting in the dark, if you are Dorothy, if you have been Dorothy for longer than you want to admit, you have not lost yourself. You have only misplaced yourself, temporarily, in the lives of people who needed you to stay small. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to say, in a quiet voice that does not need to be loud to be powerful, "I would like to see my account." That is where it begins. Not with a fight, not with anger, just with a woman, and the truth, and a single clear question she finally decided she deserved the answer to.